Number 5, consideration and possible action on appointing Robert Carey, Barry Anderson, and Jim Overton to the Board of Trustees of Logan County EMS District I-1. Is that right?
Is this a reappointment?
I believe the letter is a reappointment for 2 of them.
My question is which 2 are the reappointments?
I know Barry.
Anderson and Overton.
Yes.
And the reason I even bring this up, I mean, normally we just follow their letter of recommendation, but over in Crescent, we're having a little problem over there.
Challenging.
I don't think I'll follow their letter of recommendation. I think we'll do the application procedure over there is what I would prefer to do. I didn't know if we wanted to do that with this or not.
So,
You wanna
Marty,
strike?
on that, along those lines, I would also recommend and propose that we table this consideration and also examine the last EMS audit that was performed, because there was a lot of issues that were brought up about the EMS operation. They seemed to be kind of critical, and they weren't really answered the way I thought was responsive. So I think, have you all seen that audit report? Oh,
Not on the EMS side.
All right, here you
Not
go.
on the EMS.
Got your copy.
Oh, appreciate that.
There you are. So if you look on that first page, I just put the findings on there. So you can look at those findings, and those seem to cause a little bit of trepidation, I guess. On my part, I'm kind of wondering if this is actually correct. The management responses there are a little disconcerting. You know, the auditor says it's broke, and the management response says, yeah, we know it is broke, but that's the way we're going to do it. That's not really a good management response. So I think we should examine this and reconsider these appointments. And possibly, if there's people being reappointed, then maybe they should answer some questions to the Board of Commissioners on what we're doing to correct these issues as a part of their reappointment process. Just my
I don't have a
recommendation.
wrong with tabling.
Well, I don't have either. I would assume these trustees will still be in effect, or will this be a hiatus, a gap in having that Board of Trustees? Whoop. Okay, so there'll be a gap. What do you think?
So they're not gonna have a quorum, is that the problem?
Board of Trustees, EMS, one hereby nominated.
Well, if we're not,
And one janitor board also reappointed. When are they supposed to have another meeting?
They meet monthly.
Monthly, when are they supposed to have another meeting?
I don't know. It's
So we don't
usually
know.
the middle of the month.
So we
I don't-
really don't know that there's a hiatus yet?
I don't know when their monthly.
So we really
meeting is
don't know that
scheduled.
there's a hiatus yet?
I don't know.
Okay,
okay.
okay.
Well, then let's go ahead and do that here next time.
We're gonna table.
Table. All right, number 6, consideration and possible action on I-1 Board of Trustees and to reappoint Jim Overton and Barry Anderson as members of the Logan County EMS I-1 Board of Trustees. And we're waiting on,
Let's wait on this email, I'd like
yes,
Marvin to read it.
absolutely.
Well, I mean, I can.
Sorry I didn't have your email, I'd have sent it to you.
So I think last time we asked that this be tabled until this meeting
Right.
to allow the reappointments to come to the board and maybe explain, you know, what they were gonna do to help alleviate some of the EMS findings we had, that we talked about last time. Any of those folks show up?
Anyone contact them? I didn't.
I contacted Barry Anderson. I didn't ask him to appear. Barry, of course, is the bank president of Farmers Merchants Bank. Jim Overton is a CPA, And this new Robert Carey, they vetted, they seemed to think he was the most qualified, that he is a retired firefighter from Guthrie Fire Department.
Okay, I would ask that we again take this until they can show up and talk to us about the EMS findings and what they plan to do after reappointment. There seems to be some really significant issues going on with the Logan County EMS system in the city of Guthrie, possibly. If you look at that audit finding, there's equipment that's been audited, and the equipment that's there is older than the equipment that shows up on the list that's supposed to be there. So you could make the case that possibly the city of Guthrie could be charging the EMS more for newer equipment than they're actually supplying. I'm not saying that's happening, but with those write-ups, I mean, who's asking the questions? And I mean, just to get a management response that says, yeah, we understand that it's been written up, but we don't think it's important, that's not a good response. So I would ask again that this reappointment be tabled until we can get some responses to those
They
issues.
still have quorum, right, Troy? I mean, if we table this again.
That the EMS has a quorum.
I mean, they're still officially board members until we.
There's 2 board members, they have 3.
According to Lowell's opinion, until their successors are actually appointed, their duties would remain. I believe that the opening for Robert Carey is due to the death of a member, so they
Right.
are down 1
Right.
due to that.
So that's fulfilling
Or,
the rest of that term.
You know, I mean, it's kind of off key here, but on the Crescent EMS district, normally in the past, Marvin, what they would do, the board of directors would write recommendations, you know, appointees to our board, and we would select them. Well, they've had some bad water over at Crescent, so, I just went.
I just got my new pipes hooked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually put it in the newspaper, accepting applications for board members for the Crescent EMS district.
Yeah, I saw the announcement, yeah.
So, just to let you know how I'm going through on the Crescent side. That's our policy, that's how we do it, so, in the past, we never did on the EMS. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with tabling it. I'll give back a visit.
I second.
Table.
Are you gonna contact them?
Me? I can. If I can take that, I can take that action if that's
Well, I
fine.
mean, yeah, I'd like to.
Okay.
If you'd like to do it.
Moving on to number 7.
Hang on just a second.
Oh, sure.
When are we going to have our next meeting that we want them to do? What's the date?
That'd be the 31st.
30th.
Next regular meeting.
30th?
31st.
the
31st.
30th, 31st is a Saturday.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, 30th.
No, we can meet on the 31st too.
No, I'm good. I work 7 days a week.
All right, sir, will do. All right, moving on.
All right. Where was I?
Item 7.
Okay, items. Look through this and proceed on to number 9, which is the consideration and possible action on appointing Robert Carey and reappointing Jim Overton and Barry Anderson to the Logan County EMS I-1 Board of Trustees, table from January 15, 2015.
I make the motion we report.
I second.
Point of clarification.
Sure.
No discussion?
Sure, discuss if you
Yeah,
wish.
thank you. Mr. Anderson?
First, we had our county clerk, Troy Cole, asked to be heard.
I was just gonna clarify his motion, if I caught him correctly. He said reappoint We have 2 points on that item. One is an appointment and then 2 a reappointment.
My motion would be to appoint Robert Carey to reappoint Jim and Barry.
You have a discussion.
Yeah, a couple items. First of all, I looked at the resolution 0905. Talks about appointments of boards and commissions that the board defined, and that's supposed to be the process I think that we're supposed to be following. Because I don't think it's been deleted or modified in any way. I'm not sure that resolution is the way this is being conducted today. So I would think we would want to look at that and make sure we're following the rules that we said we were going to follow. And then the other point is that we've asked these gentlemen to show up today and talk about these audit findings for the EMS district before the appointment. I certainly understand that the 2 gentlemen here want to go ahead and reappoint without going into those. I would advise against that, but it's certainly the board's. I mean, it's a 2-to-1 board, right? In that case, I'd like to go over the audit findings.
Okay, but I got a letter from the assistant DA,
Yes.
our advisor, and I
One
did
that I
give you a
shared.
copy of it, and we're not over their audits. We're over appointing board members to the EMS board.
Which is exactly what we're doing.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Didn't say anything about audits.
Okay.
In this agenda, I don't say anything about going over an
So
audit.
if you
All right,
wish to
let's not go
over-
over an audit. Let's talk about conflicts of interest then.
All right, let's do it.
All right. Let's see, Mr. Anderson.
Yes, sir.
Could
He's not on the agenda to talk to.
Well, I believe that I've got the opportunity as a board member to ask questions.
I think we ought to stick to the agenda.
I do too.
I think we should stick to the agenda. We're talking about
So if
reappointments.
you wish to talk to Barry, why don't you do this on your own, please, sir? And let's go ahead and proceed with the agenda as it is written instead of varying from it.
Barry, if you
You
feel
get a
comfortable by
voice and do
answering
whatever
that.
you want to in this.
I
No
am a good
question.
old boy.
That's a fact, sir.
That is a fact. Sure ain't no horse's ass. Barry, if you feel comfortable answering, I'll quit bragging on
Yeah, on the audit question?
it. Yeah.
Sure.
Mr. Chair?
Would you like to address
I
that?
thought we were gonna talk about audits.
Hey, I don't think we ought to. think
I
we
really
ought to.
don't either.
No, I don't care about talking about audits anymore. I do
All
want to
right.
talk about conflicts of interest.
All right, let's talk about it. All right.
Can I address Mr. Anderson?
Conflict of interest.
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't see it on the agenda.
Well, it's something that's been going on and on and on here, right?
Should put it on the agenda, yeah.
I guess we should. Yes, we should. So, are we gonna stand here, or sit here and argue about what's on the agenda?
So
I can tell you one thing, you're not gonna run over me, buddy.
I'm not running over anybody.
That's right.
I'm just trying to point out, that I think we've got some issues that need to be addressed by the board. If you guys want to hear about them,
I'll
that's.
tell you what, if there is a conflict of interest, I think that you should go ahead and investigate that. And if there is a conflict of interest with
Right,
Barry
here it is.
Anderson being
Here
on
it is, right there.
anything,
There's a conflict of interest that I see.
then I
That-
think we ought to.
That is I just had an opportunity yesterday evening, because the auditor just published this. This is the budget for the EMS board. Talks about all the cash and everything else that they have. I'm not sure that it's appropriate for a board member to also be a member of a banking or financial institution.
Why is this?
Why is that? So you need me to explain that to you, why that
A
might be a
banker
conflict?
is a citizen. Barry has been a volunteer EMS in the past. He has his heart and soul in this.
Heart and
The
soul,
bank
I
is
understand.
not financing, to the best of my knowledge, any of the equipment or anything else. He has no monetary interest whatsoever in this equation. So if he's just a banker and that's your problem, why?
No, it's not that he's just a banker. I believe that Mr. Anderson is a bank officer. Right? Right? You're an officer of that bank?
Yes.
Right. And does your bank profit from any deposits or any money on deposits in your bank today
Yes,
from the county?
yes.
Okay. That's all the question that I have.
Very good.
I think Marvin had a good point on the Robert Carey. I mean, our protocol we set up a few years ago about doing applications. So I guess I would retract my motion, and I say I make a motion to reappoint Barry Anderson and Jim Overton, and I guess we need to do an application. If we're gonna follow our own protocol, that's what we need to do.
That sounds appropriate. I will second
Thanks
that.
for pointing that out to me, Marvin.
May I
Sure.
ask a question so I can clarify?
Absolutely.
I believe the position that Mr. Carey was being considered for is actually a vacancy, is that correct? It's,
That is correct. All those in favor of the motions?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed to the motion?
No.
Motion carries. On the
On number 5, Mr. Anderson told me he did have a deal come up today. He did say that he would like to call EMS special board meeting for the 18th, I think.
Yes,
He said he
18th.
could.
I got that.
And I would like to have a commissioner meeting so we can attend that meeting, all three of us, and maybe we can get all this hammered out.
That would be good.
Hopefully you won't have a problem.
One of the issues on, let's see here. One of the issues on this needs to be heard, I believe, and I believe that our council can instruct us as to that regard. So on number 5 is discussion with Barry Anderson and Jim Overton, who are not here, regarding audit findings of the MS1 district and discussion pertaining to possible. So the second portion pertaining to possible conflict of interest regarding members of the Logan County MS1 Board of Trustees. And I would, at this time, appreciate the Commissioner's consideration that we have input for that from our legal counsel, Assistant DA Lowell Bartow. Lowell?
It's a point of order first.
Yes, sir.
If you don't mind, Chairman. How can we go forward with item 5 when it says discussion with Barry Anderson and Jim Overton when they're not here? I'm just curious how that works.
Because he is the counsel. But if
He's
we
counsel
wish
for
to,
Jim and-
if we wish to come back to that, we can come back to that for citizens to be heard or discussions.
I mean, you can,
Because-
you're the chairman of the board, I mean, you
Right.
can make those
You
decisions,
want
right?
to
I'm just
then-
curious as to, after deciding that this wasn't something that was appropriate to be heard, what changed your mind?
Because we do have somebody who can address that particular issue.
No, I'm talking about the EMS board, conflict, the audit findings and those sorts of things.
We can't address the audit findings at this time.
No.
That was what they were going to do.
No, that's not what I mean, I understand we can't, they're not here, so we can't address it at that time. That
Correct.
makes sense to me, right?
But
I
we
get
can
that part.
address the conflict of interest because
With
that's a
them?
legal item.
How can we address it with them when they're not here? That's what I'm asking.
I apologize that I did not also include Lowell Bartow on that, because at that
So
particular
it's all
time,
you.
I was not certain if he could be here or not. But he is here.
Well, let's just hold his thoughts until.
We'll hold his
citizens are
thoughts
heard.
until citizens wishing to be heard. are
Here's
to-
his ours.
So what
So we will.
What I was curious
continue
about,
this.
again, was this showed up on the agenda today to
Yes, sir.
discuss audit findings
Yes, sir.
with Barry and Jim,
Yes, sir.
when previously you have stated that we've got no authority to do that. I'm just wondering what changed your mind.
Well, I'll tell you one thing.
I was asking the chairman.
Well,
Primarily because of your vocation on this, that you were quite strident about that as to the consideration for their reappointments. And I wanted this to be addressed specifically for the purpose of educating the public who have a bad idea as to what transpired. So I do believe that this needs to be discussed because that was brought up by you, sir, and I do believe that does need to be discussed.
And I agree.
so therefore, I wish to have that discussion, and I put it on the agenda to have that discussion. We do not have the ability to have anything done with that, but because of the media that occurred on that, because of your injections, regardless of whether you had done your proper research or not, which I had, then I think that that needs to be going out to the public because I believe they have the wrong idea about what the EMS board was into and why those audit findings occurred. So I wanted for a discussion.
And I appreciate that, and I support the discussion. I agree that it should be on here.
But we do not have that authority to do anything about it.
And I would ask them if it's important that the public understand, then why was it not important to let the public understand before these board members were reappointed?
Because it was not an agenda item.
Okay. We tried to get on the agenda 3 times, but it's not an agenda item.
I'm sorry, sir, but you had the
I'm
authority
finished with my comments. Thank you,
to
sir.
be able to put that on the agenda, and I was really honestly kind of surprised that it was not on the agenda, because that was your issue. So, sir, yes, I proceeded with the agenda as it was stated in there. I did due diligence, and I checked into all of this that you were upset about, that were the objections that you brought up. And seeing as how that was on media, I thought that it would be best for everyone if we had this discussion, which they were in agreement with, which I only was informed of their change of mind last evening. So I am disappointed that they were not here, but I do believe that we should have a special commissioner meeting to be in conjunction with the EMS board so that they can have this discussion, and possibly that should also be put on the media, and then we won't have to have that discussion here before our board. So let's see what transpires here. I'm all for open government, and I do want this to be in front of the public so they can understand the process. Because there's some new issues that are going to be coming up about the EMS for the entire county, and this needs to be discussed. So, proceeding on. Consideration and possible.
Chairman, I'm gonna stop you because,
Yes,
to be
ma'am.
very honest, I am lost as to what I'm doing with this item.
We are having no action.
Okay.
I apologize. Number 6. Let's move to citizens to be heard. And I still question on a discussion item that a citizen was not allowed to be heard. In any case, Flo, would you please comment on, I believe this would be an opportune, correct? Okay. Would you please comment on the conflict of interest that is perceived between a banker being on a board wherein those funds, accounts are held by his particular bank, which he is a member of that bank's board? Please, sir.
Statute does allow a banker to serve. The statute that you're referring to on conflict of interest actually is one that says no contract shall be entered into between any board member and a member of that board, between the board and any board member. The exception, number 1 in that statute, is that not to be counted among the contracts that are prohibited is any banking deposit or depository. That's not considered. You have that, and then later in that same statute, you have a notwithstanding anything else the statute has said, either an officer, employee, or director of any financial institution is not prohibited from serving on a public body, but if the public body, that can be any kind of board, EMS, this board, whatever, if they're going to have a transaction with that particular financial institution, then that member must abstain from voting on that particular transaction. And that's the limitation that they put in the legislation. So it's not one that says just because you're a officer, director, or employee of a bank, that keeps you from serving on a board that might have a deposit account at that bank, or that might even engage in a transaction to borrow money from that bank. It's just that the limitation is the banker board member has to abstain on any vote concerning a particular transaction. And then on the other hand, just having a deposit account is not a violation of that statute. That's what the legislature is saying.
So there's not a conflict.
There's not a conflict. That's what they're really legislating to say, is that you could read this and you would think there would be a conflict, so what we are telling you is we are making it not a conflict.
So what you're saying is, in general, there's not a conflict of a banking officer serving on a board. However, there are requirements for that to remain in effect and to be done according to the law.
Right. Abstaining, basically, if there's a transaction involving the board and that institution, that's the limitation.
But yet that body may have an account at that,
A deposit.
and that is possibly a portion of that would be paying his salary.
Right.
So he does make money off of those transactions, that he is not allowed to have any kind of vote on that action. What type of accountability and documentation is there if that question does come before that board? Is there accountability? Is there someone who comes back and double checks to make certain that he is adhering to the law?
And other than the auditor, state auditor and inspector that would audit those kinds of things anyway, I don't know of any other, the minutes of that meeting should reflect that member abstained from voting. So there would be.
So would that be a bank auditor, do you think, that would do that, or would that be the state auditor?
State auditor, if it's public, that where the state auditor has the jurisdiction to audit that particular entity, which they do in the case of an EMS district.
They would be able to audit the minutes of the bank.
And,
To
or not
make
the
certain.
bank, but the public body. If
The
it's
public body.
engaging- Yeah, if it's engaging in a transaction with that financial institution.
So
they can
he's
do
on
that.
his honor then, that when he's at that bank, to adhere to the law.
Right, yeah, but as a member of the board is what we're talking about.
Correct.
He is also on his honor to abstain from voting on that transaction. So, in other words, if the vote comes up.
Are you talking about on the EMS board?
On the EMS board, right.
But not necessarily at the bank?
Right, the bank.
That's a
would not be
different
subject
kettle
to
of
this
fish.
law.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify
Yeah,
that.
it's-
I wasn't really certain.
Yeah, the law is only gonna apply to the public body. And
I
the
see.
question of, is this a contract that they cannot engage in?
So right now, they have 2 members on that board, and they're needing a third. And so they would have to table any action until they have another member, because one person cannot second the motion.
Right. What are you
So,
talking about?
right now, at this particular moment, they cannot take any action on any kind of deposits going to that
Well, and
particular
remember,
bank.
deposits as such are not defined, or defined out of the statute as being a contract that's illegal anyway.
I see.
So just having the deposit account is not really considered a transaction.
I see.
The transaction would be, are we gonna borrow money, or are we gonna
Okay.
do something beyond just having a deposit account?
So they can't move on that.
Yeah.
I see.
Well, I've got one question for you. A month or so ago, I sent you an email about who oversees the EMS district?
An EMS district is a constitutional entity, so it's kind of a breed of its own. Even the legislature has to be careful, because they pass some laws only to find out that the laws are unconstitutional. They didn't have authority to pass them. So it's an entity. What that means, anytime we say it's a constitutional entity, the voters of the state created the entity by going to the polls. You'll sometimes hear that called a 522 board. You may have heard that terminology. That's because the state question was 522. And so we sometimes hear it called that, and everybody says, what's that? You know, they start looking for a section 522, you're not gonna find it. It's the state question that created that. It's actually codified in Article 10 in Section 9C of the Oklahoma Constitution. And it lays out everything about EMS districts. There's a little section that will say, and the legislature can legislate in this area, and they have. They've adopted a budget act for EMS districts that sets forth a budget procedure. And most of those provisions, there hasn't been an issue with their constitutionality. But other than that, where we go for direction on what can be done, it's the Constitution provision itself and the opinions of the Attorney General that have interpreted those provisions, and of course the opinions of the courts if there's any court case interpreting those provisions. And so the opinions you'll see from the Attorney General are going to say, that's not a county entity, that's not a county department, you know, those aren't county employees, and so they are a kind of a class of their own. The Board of County Commissioners appoints the members of the Board of Trustees. There's to be 5 of them. And of course, that's the same legislation where when we talk about the school district being the boundary, that's because that's what the constitutional provision is. If you create a district, an EMS district, it follows the boundaries of your school districts as you do that. So all that governing law comes from the constitutional provision, with the exception of some budget matters that the Budget Act covers.
One follow-up question here. Again, I'm kind of new to being around politicians. In a democratically elected republic, which we serve in, how can a board that's appointed by elected officials not be responsible to those elected officials for the performance of their duties? I'm having a little bit of a conflict in my mind about that piece, because at some point in the pyramid, all right, going up, if it's not the county board of commissioners that would have some oversight, not to tell the board how to conduct their business, because I understand that would be illegal, but to bring them forward to answer questions on audits, because the auditor, the state auditor, only produces findings and recommendations. They have no authority to enforce. Right? They have no enforcement authority. So I'm kind of getting back to where's the people's enforcement? The people that elect officials. What elected officials responsible for that enforcement piece? I know there's a lot of controversy on this. I've done a little reading too. But if you'd comment on that, I'd really appreciate your input on that.
And I would say the only authority would be if an EMS board member is not doing their job, your appointment authority is you wouldn't appoint that person.
Okay, great.
I don't know if within that you've got the power to remove. The legislation or the constitutional piece would have to say that if you had the power to remove a board member that you appointed, but that would certainly give you.
But I certainly agree with that. I haven't seen anything on removal either. I was just, but you know, the responsibility to the citizens is my point, and what I'm trying to figure out here on these board appointments.
Yeah, and it would be, I would think, the greatest amount of authority is you're picking the members that are gonna run that district. So you do have that authority, but then as far as once that's done, overseeing it, you don't have until the next time you appoint somebody. That's where it's a little bit different. Again, the voters created the thing. And that's why you're not seeing what you usually see when you see other boards where there would be more kind of a supervisory element, is because you've got the voters themselves that said, we want to create emergency medical service districts, and here's how they're going to be created, here's how the members are going to be appointed, here's how they can borrow money. It's all laid out in that one section.
So at the end of the day, our only control over whether or not those boards are doing their job is through our appointment process.
That's really it.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. You've answered my question.
We